right, good evening, everybody. And thank you for joining us for virtual day trip to wine country presented by Citi. I'm Sam Kimball from New York Wine Events. And today we are going back to the awesome Napa County in sunny California, world famous, as we all know, as a wine growing region. And so I wanted to go back in time and revisit some fun, fast facts that we know about Napa. Only 4% of the wine grapes grown in California come from the Napa Valley, Napa County. It's a dry Mediterranean climate. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it's perfect for growing wine grapes. It only covers 2%. There's a little trivia factoid. 2% of the Earth's surface. And yet Napa Valley wine industry represents $50 billion plus to the American economy. And in Napa County, there are 430 wineries producing over 800 different wine brands. And so it's a pretty awesome place. If you have been, you know that. If you have not been, it is a place that you should put on your list of places to go and things to see. Specifically, we're going to an absolutely gorgeous part of the Napa Valley virtually today and this evening. We're going to St. Helena, California, which, by the way, St. Helena is known as the heart of Napa Valley. And we're headed to Calafia Cellars. Calafia Cellars is a boutique winery, an absolutely a gem in the wine world of California and Napa County. And their calling card is that they are really small production, super focused, less than 1,000 cases a year. And they make these gorgeous, elegant wines, delicate, refined, a soft touch. And they've been doing it for 41 years, which is really cool. I would say Calafia is, not to be facetious, is a 40-year overnight success story, and it's such a privilege to be visiting with these folks today and going out to their winery all the way back to 1979, and they stuck it out through thick and thin. You'll hear about that story shortly. A lot of sweat. A lot of sweat equity, and they really have become known as a Bordeaux specialist and integrated particular grape varietals, Malbec and Petit Verdot among them. Although I'm really excited because we're going to be sampling a white wine that's made from a grape varietal that I've never had before tonight. And if you want to learn all about Calafia Cellars, you can visit calafiacellars.com. And I do have, as I often will, I do have a spoiler alert. Not only am I going to show you how to get to their website, but we do have a very cool offer from the winery. You can get any 10% off of any 4 bottles or more, and flat rate shipping if you use the promo code NYWE, like New York Wine Events. So that's very cool, and we're excited about that. I think that you're going to be blown away by the story behind the wines, and I know that when you taste the wines, or if you already are familiar with them, you will be blown away by the wines themselves. So welcome everybody. Please feel free to ask questions along the way in the chat or in the Q&A panel in Zoom. We will answer them on the fly as you ask them. We always do that. And also hit the chat. If you've joined us, hit the chat, please, and let us know where in the world you are tuning in from. We get people from all over creation, and it's really awesome to see in the chat. Just put your city and state. And it's great to see where everybody is logging in from. And today, one of the things that I'm really excited about is we're going to be visiting with a legendary winemaker who makes Napa his home. In fact, makes St. Helena, California, in the heart of Napa County, his home. And we've had the privilege and the pleasure of hanging out with and working with this winemaker at our events, our physical events in New York City over the years, specifically the Zinfandel experience. And actually, our winemaker guest tonight, we have two guests tonight, the founders, one being the winemaker, was the first California Zinfandel winemaker that I met way back when. And I would be remiss not to thank Rebecca Robinson and the Zinfandel Advocates and Producers, also known as ZAP, for making that introduction. Because it was going back years ago, more than 5 years ago, that I originally met Randle. So it is a total pleasure tonight to host the founders of Calafia Cellars, MaryLee and Randle Johnson. Randle's the winemaker. MaryLee is the everything else. Nothing can run without MaryLee. And so I'm thrilled to have you guys. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
it's really
great
a pleasure.
to be here. Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
It's awesome to visit virtually and travel virtually to the Napa Valley. So Randle, I have to ask you, how did you come to name the winery Calafia Cellars?
Well, we had our first wine ready to go in about 1980. We had the 79 vintage, and I had wine in the bottle in 1980. And I had a little vineyard, but I didn't really have a building, and I needed a name. And I wasn't going to call it Johnson Vineyards. I mean, how bland is that? And there was already Johnson's Alexander Valley Wines in Alexander Valley back in that day. So we had a little name the winery contest. And a very dear friend of ours was a California history teacher. And we got several entries. We got over a dozen entries. And some of those names are actually brands today, actually. But we chose Calafia because it is the mythological queen who California is named after, Queen Calafia. And it's quite an exotic saga. It starts with Columbus on one of his voyages. And the story about this island in the Caribbean went back to Portugal. And an author of the day by the name of Montalvo picked up this story, incorporated it in a book of romanticized European history that was published in 1503. And then when Hernando Cortez landed at the tip of Baja in 1510, he said, hey, this island kind of reminds me of what I read about in Montalvo's book. I'm gonna call this place Calafia's Land. He didn't realize, of course, he was about 3,000 miles off, but he put it at the tip of Baja because he thought it was an island. And then a month later, they found out it was really a peninsula. And he said, oh, heck with it. I'm just going to leave Calafia's Land there. And it stuck. And it moved up the coast from Baja Sur to Baja Norte and then into California. And then in 1937, a Stanford history PhD candidate to take it upon herself, Ruth Putnam was her name, to verify this lineage. And she spent 3 years researching it because there were some other theories on how California got its name. But at the end of the day, she came to the conclusion that California got its name from the way I just described. And so that put an end to the story. There was an idea that California's cala, meaning warm, and horno, meaning oven in Spanish, warm oven. But this cala horno theory was proved not to be the case, and it was Queen Calafia.
That's amazing. So in fact, I never knew the origin or the etymology of California, and it comes from Calafia.
And there's one more important detail. I know we have a lot to cover tonight, but a lot of Ruth Putnam's research was on the actual name Calafia, because in Columbus's journal, the island wasn't named, and either was she. So Montalvo had to come up with a name, and Ruth dug pretty darn deep. And where she got to was the Egyptian staff that the pharaohs carried with the loop on the top. That tall staff is called a caliph.
Yeah.
And if you feminize it in the Romanic languages with IA, it becomes Califia. And this is the best that Ruth could come up with. It's how Montalvo got this name, to name the woman Queen Califia. So there you go.
Amen.
Well, that's an awesome story. Now, in going back to the beginning, I mean, you and people in the wine world know that you're well known as a winemaker, as the founding winemaker at Hess Selections, which is a huge and famous brand.
Hess Collection.
Hess Collection for 37 years, starting in 1983. But you, in fact, Calafia, your personal wine brand, and what we're talking about tonight, started in 1979.
That's correct.
How did you get started? Because I know you had been in the winemaking world previously and working your way up. But what sparked that, and how did you get started?
Well, I got out of Davis in '74 and came straight to Napa Valley, and I was working here for 9 years. I worked at Rutherford Hill. In those days, it was called Souverain. I worked at Stag's Leap Winery with Carl Domaney. I worked with Nils Venge at what's now Plumpjack. Anyway, and then I really kind of found my home on Mount Veeder. And in 1977, I ended up on Mount Veeder at Mayacamas.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Mayacamas for 3 years, and that's where I really cut my teeth on those brutal, nasty tannins. So by the time I got in charge of building a winery for Hess on Mount Veeder, I'd had a lot of experience with tannin. I basically a winery for Cabernet using Pinot Noir methods to extract less tannin and have them more gentle. And it's been sort of my life quest to tame those tannins. And I think as you get onto these red wines, we're going to find that the tannins are in fact tamed.
That's where we talk about the soft touch and the elegance of your wines. And what, was that sort of the central tenet of your wine making philosophy?
Yes, it was. I love aging wines, and I've got some 40-year-old wines to prove that you don't have to have massive tannins for aging. You need structure. You need acid. You need structure. You need a skeleton that's firm but fine. And then you hang all this nice fleshy stuff on it for early drinking. And in the early days of my career, I used Merlot, that nasty word, but not really so nasty. I just read an article today, by the way, that Merlot's on big surge back. So take heart, all Merlot fans. Yeah. But I use Merlot as a flesh and softening blender. But then in 1991, I discovered the world of Malbec, and it changed my world. It was an epiphany, and I found it, as many things in the wine business, kind of by accident. A grower on Mount Veeder basically gave me 5 tons of Malbec that he had extra, and he knew that I would fall in love with it, but and I did, and I've been a Malbec fan ever since. And it's a big blending component that I use both for Cabernet and my proprietary red blend.
Well, it's super interesting because one of the things that people don't realize, because Malbec obviously has become more popularized and people in America are more familiar with it than they were, say, 20 or 30 years ago, is that it's a French grape, but it's known as being from, wines from Argentina. So a lot of people think that Malbec really came from Argentina. It's made obviously in other places too, like in California.
Yeah.
Which is, a big part of our mission at New York Wine Events is education and awareness and discovery. And so that's why I'm so excited about the first wine tonight, which we'll talk about in a minute, being a grape that probably most of the people watching have never had. And so talk a little bit about in your kind of starting out with the winery, and then also your work with the Hess Collection and other places. Were there particular grape varietals that you were more focused on than others? I mean, for example, I know you've done a lot with Zinfandel in your career.
Yes. Well, I started my Zin career actually my first year in Napa Valley. There was a famous Zinfandel vineyard on Atlas Peak called the Mead Ranch, MEAD. And that fruit went to, in those days, Souverain Winery, and now Rutherford Hill. And I got to work with that wonderful Zinfandel. And then I worked with Zin off and on. And when I got to Mount Veeder, there was a famous vineyard there, the Bramblin Vineyard, that's head trained, non-irrigated on the slopes of Mount Veeder. It's made by Peter Franis now. And I've always loved Zin. And now I make Zin from all over the place. But, working with Hess and having 350 acres basically of Bordeaux varieties, I became really a Bordeaux specialist. In the early days at Hess, William Hill was the developer along with Donald Hess, and they decided that those hills could be Burgundian-esque for Chablis-style Chardonnay. And they were right, except the American market was not ready for lean, mean, austere Chardonnay. They're more ready now, and we make at Hess a wonderful dry Chablis-like Chardonnay. But back in those days, we're talking 82, 3, 4. The fruit, it was all about fruit. Donald Hess used to tease me. He said, "You Americans, you always want a fruit salad in your white wine glass." He said, "If you want a fruit salad, order a fruit salad." If you want a glass of wine, you have a glass of European wine, because he's Swiss and from Europe. But in any event, we slowly had to take a lot of Chardonnay out. And we replaced it with more Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot. Those were the three Bordeaux varietals of the day. But then in the 90s, we added Malbec because it was so great. And we also added Petit Verdot.
Yeah.
And I'm totally in love with Petit Verdot too. It's a very difficult grape to grow and manage in the vineyard, but if you can get Petit Verdot right, it's actually even better than Malbec.
Interesting. We're going to do a little lightning round now. Some questions that are coming in, and some things in the chat. I do want to give a shout out to everybody who put in their location. Awesome to see Steve logging in from Argentina tonight, and Myra from Pennsylvania, Nancy from Long Island. And we've got Illinois in the house, Waterloo, Illinois, and also Los Angeles. David Brightstein sends his best to you guys.
Oh, well, thank you, David.
So so a bunch of people, and Sunnyvale and Nebraska. Love Nebraska. So so real quick, so lightning round, we got a bunch of questions and people curious about things. One is, and this I think is a quick one, but Nancy asked, why do you call Merlot nasty? And I think you were being facetious, but explain
Well,
that.
I was being well, I'm referring to the movie that bashed Merlot.
Right. Sideways. The movie Sideways.
Yeah.
which completely unfairly, because there's some unbelievable Merlots out there, and
Sure.
always have been. But that character in Sideways hated Merlot.
Yeah.
So Nancy, I don't know if you saw the movie, but that was every other line was this guy saying, "I hate Merlot. It's a terrible grape," and he was very.
And then at the end of the movie, he drank his Chateau Petrus, the best Merlot in the world, at a Burger King.
There you go. Exactly. All right.
No,
So,
no,
couple of other things. Steve was asking if you could give, since you're in the heart of the Napa Valley and Napa County there, he was asking if you could give kind of a quick report on the fire this year and how do you manage to get through that, and the impact on the harvest, etc.
That's a loaded question.
You want to take that one, hon?
No, you go.
Okay, well, the fire was bad. We had, in a nutshell, we had two of them. We had one that started in August when we had this freak lightning strike, this thunderstorm system that was generated by a thunderstorm that got blown the wrong direction out of Arizona northerly. And then they say that there was a tail end of a cyclone in the South Pacific that got blown northerly. And these two systems collided and intermingled, and all up and down the coast, well, mostly northern coast of California. And you probably heard news reports that there was like 3,000 dry lightning strikes. And these strikes started 4 or 5 major fires. And one of them was right in Napa Valley. It's in a little sub-valley to our east called Childs Valley. It became known as the LNU complex. And I've actually seen video from the lady's phone where the fire started. Trouble is, she called in the fire at 6 a.m, but the CDF couldn't get there. That's California Division of Fire. They didn't get there for 2 hours. And by that time, all they could do was save her house.
Yeah.
And the fire was off and running. So we had that big fire. And now that smoke, unfortunate for our great Central Valley, but that smoke blew easterly. Simultaneously with that was what many of you probably heard on the news of the Wahlberg fire. And that was started in Sonoma County, but it blew easterly to onshore flow, and all that smoke blew into Russian River Valley and Dry Creek and Petaluma Gap and ruined a ton of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. More Pinot than Chard. But I know dozens of producers in Sonoma County that made 0 Pinot Noir this year. Okay, coming back to Napa, this fire hung out for a long time, took a long time to get it out. Then the big fire in Fresno area, the wind changed and drove that smoke northerly. And then that smoke circled back into Napa Valley at high elevation. And I think a very key takeaway that I'd like you all have tonight is this. One big thing. Fresh smoke versus old smoke. Fresh smoke is very potent and very lethal for grapes. And by the way, it goes right through the skin of the berry. People say, well, how the hell does the smoke get in there? And the Aussies lead the world in smoke taint research, but we have a guy in Washington State, out in Prosser, Washington, Eastern Washington, on the east side of the Cascades, that, and you'll love his name. This is a guy you'll never forget. And his name is Dr. Tom Collins. I'm that Tom Collins. So he's got a whole staff and research budget because Washington State has suffered continuously from smoke because they get smoke from British Columbia. This year they got fire from Washington State and a lot of Oregon fires too. There was entire little towns in Oregon that burned up. Anyway, we know now from smoke research, both from Prosser, Washington, and the Aussies, that smoke goes directly through the skin. There was an idea that it went through the leaf, the stomates of the leaves, and was translocated to the berries, but this theory doesn't seem to be holding up now. Anyway, there are a couple of varieties of grape that are really sensitive to smoke. One of them is Petit Verdot that I just mentioned, and another one is Syrah. The other grape varieties seem to be kind of on an even keel or an even susceptibility standard, but they're all susceptible.
Mhm.
All right. The second fire started on Sunday. Was it the 27th of September, honey? Yeah.
Yeah.
I woke up, my usual biological clock woke me up on a Sunday morning at 6:15, and I smelled smoke in the bedroom. And I went, uh-oh. Went up to the window and looked out, and 5 miles to the north, I could see this tsunami of smoke headed towards us slowly. And this is the beginning of what became known as the glass fire. And this is the one that really nailed us. It took them over 2 weeks to get it out. The winds changed. It jumped across the Napa Valley, sadly, at the northern reaches where the valley is very narrow. Sterling Vineyards almost burned. Rombauer, everybody knows Rombauer. They almost lost their winery and home, but the firemen saved it. They were on a knoll, so all the trees on the knoll burned around Rombauer. You've heard reports, I'm sure, of small wineries getting burned up. Very sad. And it jumped to the west side. Then it comboed with another fire coming from Kenwood in Sonoma Valley, and it was coming up its eastern ridge. And this is the fire that nailed Spring Mountain. And that was very, very devastating. We almost lost Schramsberg, but they saved it. Early reports told us that Schramsberg burned down. We saved Keenan. At the top of the ridge, Sonoma County line, again on Spring Mountain, Pride was saved.
Kane is gone completely.
Kane is gone. Barnett was saved. Sherwin family was burned totally. We had a very dear friend that lost her home up there on the top of the ridge. Ridge tops always get the worst of it. Anyway, it burned down Spring Mountain. It came all the way to the back door of St. Helena on the west side. They evacuated a big subdivision called Sylvaner on the west side of St. Helena. Spotswood was evacuated. We live on the wrong side of the track. We live on the east side, just joking. And we didn't have to mandatory evacuate, but the smoke was so bad here. MaryLee and I had to leave for 6 days and stay in a hotel in Napa.
Wow.
But I'll quit talking about this, but you got the whole rundown now. But on that Sunday morning, I had not planned to pick my own vineyard, but I got on the phone at about 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and I made about 8 or 9 phone calls, and I put an entire harvest together in less than an hour. And by 9 o'clock, 9:30, we were picking grapes here. And by 12:30 in the afternoon, I had all the grapes off in the bins on the truck with a borrowed forklift, and they were going to Healdsburg where we make our wine. And I got them out of here. And I got them out of here. And 2 hours later, about 5 o'clock, that glass fire smoke that I saw 11 hours earlier was upon us, and we could hardly sleep. We suffered that night. For those of you who use Purple Air, the air quality index, the AQI, you're supposed to be under 50 for clean air. It's green. We had 750 to 800 AQI here in downtown St. Helena from the smoke.
Wow.
All right, that's it.
All right.
That's the end of this. Let's get a glass of wine.
Yeah, let's start tasting wine, and thank you for walking us through that. It's tough stuff, but it's real, and people are always interested to know what's happening. So we're tasting 4 wines today. The first one is the white wine that I mentioned at the beginning. That is a grape that I've never had before, and that I've opened the bottle a little while ago, and it's spectacular. So it is. I'm going to put it up on the screen so everybody can see it here. I'm just going to go in my background, but this is the Verdelho. You can see it behind me here, and it's a 2019, and it's a great value. It's $25 a bottle. So Randle and MaryLee, tell us a little bit about this wine. What are the tasting notes? What's the origin? What's that grape all about? And what's a great food pairing for it?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this grape than I will on the rosé, because everybody has some good sense of rosé, and the rosé story, though interesting, isn't quite as long. But this is kind of a very interesting story, and it goes back to my Zinfandel roots in a way. I was working with a grower in Amador County, by the way, one of my favorite Zinfandel areas of California, Gold Rush Country, which, by the way, is where Zinfandel first got started in California. First plantings of Zin were in Amador County. Which is the first year that Zinfandel showed up. Scott and I are great buddies. Anyway, so I was working with this grower, and he said, "Hey, Randle, come over here. I want to show you this Verdelho." And I said, "What's that, Chuck?" And he goes, "Well, come over here and check it out." So I went over, beautiful little patch of, it's about 1 acre, beautiful trellis. He was a great farmer, and the little tiny clusters, and those little clusters can fit inside of this wine glass. They're not, they're even smaller than Sauvignon Blanc clusters. And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" He says, "I want you to buy these grapes and turn it into great wine." I said, "Well, Chuck, what am I going to do with it?" And he says, "Well, you're going to sell it in your tasting room in your wine club." Right. Now, listen, this, you guys, to be clear, I'm wearing my Hess hat now. I was making Zinfandel for Hess. So he gave me a couple bottles from the previous year. I took them down to our tasting room manager, wine club manager, and the president. We sat down and tasted it, and they agreed with me that it was delicious and would fit great into my heirloom and heritage varietal program. I was making eclectic reds like Carignan and Mourvedre and Zin and Petit Syrah and Charbonneau, and they needed an eclectic white. So I started doing research on it. I bought Chuck's grapes, and he was absolutely right. It did well. And then I researched it and found out it was from the Madeira Islands, and it's the core variety in those famous Madeiras that were popular from 1825 to like 1925. The Madeira craze kind of phased out during Prohibition. But to this day, you can actually buy Madeiras, and some of the old ones are expensive. I've seen Madeira up to $1,000 a bottle.
We actually had, full disclosure, we had Bartholomew Broadbent on the show about 2 months ago.
Oh, great.
Broadbent makes Madeira, obviously.
Yeah. And just so, I'll just quickly name the other 3 varieties. Buell, B-U-A-L, Cersal, and of course you got to throw Muscat in for that great floral. So it was Muscat of Alexandria. And the English market started this craze. Also by accident. I won't go into why it was an accident. That'll be our next Zoom.
Thank you.
But they made this wine type famous, and at one point in history, it was even more internationally known than champagne. And then, as it worked along, the growers and the wineries and the market sort of figured out that this is a variety that holds its fruit and its acid in extremely warm climates. So it went to warm climate countries as a prominent white varietal. And all of you that drank Yellowtail in college from Australia, you're drinking a goodly amount of Verdelho, because in the central Australia, where it's hotter than Hades, Verdelho is very prominent and makes good, solid wine. And it showed up in all that Yellowtail. Real quickly on with DNA profiling, which has been a godsend to the wine and grape world. And there's a great book on it, and I won't talk, well, I can show you the book later, but it's from Jancis Robinson, the famous English wine writer. She and 3 geneticists wrote this great book on varieties, and it's a Bible. And I went to this book and I found out that originally they felt that Verdelho came to Madeira Islands from the mainland of Portugal, but with the clergy. But with DNA profiling, we now know that it kind of scooted along the north coast of Africa. It went through Algeria, Morocco, went out to the Azores, to the Canary Islands, and from the Canaries up to Madeira. And then from Madeira, it exploded in international. Nowadays, that the sweet wine thing of Madeira is over, essentially, the growers make nice, dry table wine. And my buddy Chuck, back to Madeira, Amador County, and Chuck Sisney, he was a port freak. And he owned part of a port works, Calaveras Port Works. And they were growing Verdelho for a white port. But they were phasing out the port works, and they needed a home to make a dry Verdelho. So I made it for Hess Collection Winery for 6, 7, 8 years. Then one day, the wine club manager said, well, you know, Randall, we've got our own eclectic whites coming in. You know, we've got Viognier and Albarino and Gruner Veltliner coming in from our own estate vineyards. We don't really need the Verdelho anymore. I was very sad and very mad. And I came home and my lovely wife said, honey, take heart. We will make the Verdelho now for Calafia. And as always, she has the best idea, and we've been making it for Calafia ever since. So go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, tell us a little about the tasting notes, because I just took a sip. I've got my glass here. It is really, really distinctive tasting. This is not like any white wine you just normally have.
Yeah, this is a great ABCC wine. And how many of you out there in Wineland know that one? ABCC, anything but Cabernet or Chardonnay. So when I brought this onto Calafia, I knew you can't put this on a grocery store shelf. You can't find this at Total Wine. You know, you can't find it at Kroger. You have to, it would just sit there and languish. You have to learn about it, educate, and taste. So I think it's so great because when it's ice cold, it has it's what I call the citrus camp. It's got that grapefruit, kiwi, lemon zest feel and crispness to it. It's great with shellfish, scallops. MaryLee and I have it with filet of sole every week religiously. But then when it warms up in the glass, it kind of morphs into what I call the ripe fruit camp. It morphs into apricot and pear and honeydew melon and cantaloupe and maybe even a little twinge of banana. So the wine evolves and changes its aroma profile. It's just an awesome, awesome wine.
Yeah, this one is absolutely delicious. I had no idea what to expect when I opened it up and poured a glass, but wow, it is something, and it just has so much flavor and so much character.
And it's round. It's a finish. It's got good acid and crisp, but it's got a good what we call a mid palate.
Yep.
It's got some nice rich texture in the mid part of your mouth.
So seafood for this one,
Scallops.
scallops. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous, this wine.
Prawns and light white fish, trout, sole, just delicious.
Yeah.
And heck, salads too. We have this wine with salads. And for the holidays coming up, you guys, you need something as an aperitif when getting the show started. I usually try to say when guests arrive, but this year no guests are going to be arriving, right? So you just have to pop a bottle and drink it by yourself. What can I say?
It's all right. It's we're doing small Thanksgiving this year. So let's move on to the next
Okay.
the next wine, which is, I want to ask you straight away, and everybody can see the wine in my background here. What makes this extraordinary dark pink, gorgeous color for this Princess Rosé that you make?
Well, we use the word princess because it follows on our Queen Calafia theme, and we're going to have another wine coming up that follows this theme. So we decided to put it in, obviously, in a clear bottle. All rosés are this way, and I'm sure you've all been to the rosé shelf, the cold box, and you've seen every shade of pink known to man. And the French, where rosé started, in Tavel and Bandol, they love it pale, and they grow grapes to make rosé, high crop. These rosés coming to us from France are mostly under $20 a bottle, and so to make economics work, you have to have a high crop, but you don't need high sugar and you don't need a lot of color. You'll notice here at the bottom it says rosé of Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is a big, I make rosé some years from Pinot and some years from Sangiovese. I really like Sangiovese as a rosé variety. This is from Russian River, as you can see. Anyway, the thing about color is everybody has their own preference, and most winemakers have their own preferences. I like a little bit darker than just pale. This is probably medium red. It's not orange. You'll find some rosés that are kind of in the orange camp, and that's okay. Don't be harsh on rosés that are orangey, because some of them just come out that way.
Well, it's also the amount of time that the skins are in the tank right after the grapes have been crushed. Right.
That's right. The French will use 0 skin contact time. They'll take the grapes directly to the press, press the juice off, and ferment it. And the other way that we make mostly in the United States is called the saignée process. Saigné's root word is sangre, which is the French word for blood. So we're bleeding the tank. So we crush the red grapes, put them in a tank, let them sit on the skins for a while, 1 hour, 2 hours, 4, 8. Some people even leave their rosés on skin contact overnight. Then you draw the juice off. The longer you've left it, the darker it is. And then this draw off, you ferment and turn it into a rosé, leaving the tank behind more concentrated. So this is why a lot of Pinot Noir producers use the saignée process to concentrate and get more intense flavor in their Pinots, or any other red grape you want. You can make rosé from every grape. And we have one big famous rosé back in the day. They didn't call it that. They made rosé from Zinfandel. Oh, and what did they call it? Oh, they called it White Zin.
White Zin.
Oh.
White Zin. So now I want to answer Myra's question because, and this is an intuitive question that is logical given the darker color. Is this rosé higher in sugar?
No, don't think, Myra, of color associated with sugar. The higher the sugar, the higher the color. No, you can pick rosé destined grapes at 20 bricks or 22 or 24. The color is completely dependent on how long the juice is in contact with the skins. Again, the French have zero, or many, or the historic traditional method française is zero contact with the skins.
Mm-hmm.
But here in the United States, we all use some skin contact.
So this one, the skins were just on a little longer. What are the tasting notes here? I mean, I also love this. It was the first time I had it was when I opened the bottle today. What are the tasting notes on this one, Randle? And this one has enough character that I feel like you can really make some nice food pairings with it.
Yeah, well, I want to take rosé to a slightly higher level. The critics look at two different things. The media and most wine critics look at only two parameters for rosé. They look at the color, which is extremely subjective analysis, and they look for acid. They look for crispness and freshness. I want fruit too. I want some aroma. So I select my seigneurs based on what I'm smelling in the fermenter fruit-wise. And I hope those of you who get one of our rosés will find some nice fresh fruit. And I hate to say it, but some of these rosés smell like roses, and they have that little bit of floral perfume that that I find very, very nice. You'll hear the descriptor of strawberry a lot, sometimes pomegranate. But
I get fruit off of this, but I also get a little bit of spice too.
Yeah, well, once again, when wines warm up in the glass, they morph and they evolve and show more nuance. You know, we all drink rosés pretty darn cold.
Yeah,
which is fine. There's summer sippers, and they should be that way. Fresh fruit. MaryLee and I have a fresh fruit plate and with some cheese, and we start our evening off happy hour with a rosé. Then we go to the Verdelho.
right.
Then we get serious.
So on that note, what do you guys like to eat with this rosé?
Everything.
Well, in the summertime, we'll actually have it with salad, our salad course. And MaryLee is an excellent chef and will fantastic salads. And I know I'm not supposed to say this, but beets, you know, we have a little yellow beet, orange beet, or even red beet salad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, rosé goes great with that. It goes great with charcuterie. We'll have a little charcuterie bruschetta plate, and we'll do rosé with that.
Well, I got one for you since we're 2 weeks out before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Rosé and turkey is terrific.
Yeah, the white meat. And again, while you're all hanging around in the kitchen and nibbling off the bird and picking, and even afterwards, wash it down with some nice rosé. It's great. Rosé is just so versatile, extremely versatile. And this is one of the reasons it's now so popular in the United States. We make rosé by popular demand. Our customers just got on me 5 or 6 years ago and said, you know, they just absolutely insisted I make a rosé. So here it is. But like I say, I really work hard on it to kick it up a notch in the aroma department.
Got it. Okay. Well, we in our last 10 minutes, I want to make sure we cover these last two wines here. So I'm gonna switch over to the 2017 Napa Valley Cabernet, which I've put in my screen in the background here. You know, obviously Napa Valley is famous for Cabernet Sauvignon. I opened this bottle, and my wife is my litmus test, and I gave her a taste of the Verdelho. She loved it, and then she tasted this, and she just looked up and said, "That's really nice." So that was a high compliment, because she didn't know she was going to be quoted on the broadcast tonight. So tell us a little bit about the origins of this. Obviously, there's Cabernet Sauvignon, but there's some other grapes. And before we do that, Janet has raised her hand and has a question. Hold on one second here. Let me, Janet, I'm going to ask you to speak your question. Are you there, Janet? You can actually ask the question directly if you unmute yourself. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat.
I think she's still muted.
Yep. Yeah, I think she is still muted. All right, Janet, put your question in the chat. We'll have Randle and MaryLee answer it. Yeah, if you do have a question and you want to speak it, you can do that, or just let us know. So Randle, what's the origin of this one? I mean, obviously, this is a world-class Cabernet Sauvignon production region.
Well,
what's your take on Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon?
Well, there's many different styles. My whole theme over the years is to strive for elegance and balance. Balance is kind of a trite word, but it's really so true. I don't like a lot of oak. I want the fruit to show. It's very hard for us winemakers and vineyard people to achieve wonderful fruit profiles. So why cover it up with something that you can just buy off the shelf? So I'm a moderate oak guy. I use 1/3 to 40% new oak. Over the years, I have my favorite barrels. I'm very high on a very small cooper from France, from Bordeaux, called d'Argenus. But I've used dozens of coopers over the years. This particular cab has its roots in Mount Veeder. I also like Calistoga for a Cabernet, because these long hang time variety, Bordeaux varieties, need heat. You know, everybody talks all the time about cool, cool, cool. We want cool nights for reds, which we have here in Napa because of our fog. But we need heat during the day. So I blend in a little Calistoga cab. Mount Veeder, it gives me fruit, but it also gives me tannin. And as you've heard me say earlier, I blend in Malbec and Petit Verdot. This particular wine we're having tonight is 15% Malbec and 9% Petit Verdot. That adds up to 24%.
Mm-hmm.
So this wine is just barely makes the varietal requirement of Cabernet 75%.
Well, I have a high compliment for you, and that is I opened this about an hour and a half ago. And so it's opened up in the glass that I poured. And I'm an East Coaster. I'm a New Yorker. And years ago, and a corporate job I had for years, I used to travel to California almost every week of the year. And, you know, I have fond memories of going out to dinner when I got to California with, you know, for business or whatever. And somebody would order a really nice bottle of California Cabernet Sauvignon in Napa Valley. And this, to me, it's absolutely delicious. It's like stunning. It's elegant. It has a soft touch, but it's got all this character, and it's just oozing that you know, the structure of a California Cabernet Sauvignon. And it reminds me of those trips I used to make.
Yeah, well, I want this puppy to hang around for 15 years at least, maybe 20. And I've shown now that we've been doing this for 40 years, I've got wines in my library that are 40 years old, and they're not too shabby. So I like the elegance up front, but I want the structure for the long term. And these are delicate, or these are needles that we thread. And we don't make it every year, but after 40 years, I better know what I'm doing by now.
So I got a question for you. What does two founders of a winery in Napa pair with this wine?
Oh my gosh.
Well,
All beef, of course, but one of our favorite things is blue cheese, or Stilton. Some heavy duty cheese goes really well with it. But any big heavy meal, it's a very versatile wine as well, which Randle's really known for. But we've had it with spaghetti, and we've had it with Chateaubriand. And it runs the whole gamut of those.
Yeah.
And right now, since we know we're going to have a couple of really nice red wines for tonight, MaryLee's got some lamb in the oven.
Lamb
Yeah.
Shanks. So this wine would go great with osso buco, winter dish cassoulet.
Yeah.
Cabernet goes great with cassoulet.
Beef
Bourguignon. Beef Bourguignon.
All
you guys in Nebraska, we love Nebraska. We're there a lot, and we know that you guys you eat a lot of beef there.
Well, and the other thing too is that like this has, I'm getting a real Bordeaux sensibility off of how nuanced and how soft touch this is. So I could see it with, like a cassoulet, some of those French dishes that are heavier, but they're very nuanced in their flavor.
We're very gentle during the fermentation, you guys. We don't do heavy extraction from the skins, and we have very elegant barrels. A lot of Cabernet too strong from the extraction of the oak.
And I call those Chateau 2x4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your favorite.
And they become known.
Go ahead.
California cabs have become known for being big. But what's really great about this is it's so interesting. An hour and a half after opening the bottle, it's just opened up, and it's got a character that it was great after I opened it, and it's a whole nother thing now.
Yeah.
That's the same old thing. This is why we decant wine. This is why we use big wine glasses. This is why we let wine work in the glass. This is why you don't pronounce judgment on a wine 5 minutes after you poured it. You pronounce judgment on a wine the next day, actually.
Yeah, really, really good point. So on that, let's move on to the last one.
The grand finale.
Which is, and I'm going to mess this up because, I used to live in Latin America. So I like to call it La Reina, but it's La Reina.
Correct. Both are correct. Both are correct.
Yes, both are correct. So what's the difference between La Reina, which I have in my background here on the screen, and the Napa Valley Cabernet that we were just talking about?
It's the real deal. You'll see it on Sam's screen. Well, couple of things. First of all, this is a Bordeaux proprietary blend. This is in the kind of the ilk of what's that famous Bordeaux blend that Phelps makes? I always forget. Insignia. And it's in the ilk of Opus One kind of a thing, where you don't follow the varietal rules. This particular version, the percent's vary a tad every year. This one is 62% Cabernet, 26% Petit Verdot, and 12% Malbec. So we have 38% non-Cabernet in this wine,
and it's a steak,
which makes it is really rich. And the other big thing here is this is our little tiny vineyard around our home in St. Helena. This is estate growing, and I have 2 vineyard guys that are like my brothers, and they're out there on the weekends fine tuning these grapes with tweezers. I'm telling you, this is like a bonsai vineyard. And this is the vineyard that I picked, like I told you about the fire, 3 hours before the smoke hit it. And I've done lab tests, by the way, you guys, on my wine in 2020, and I'm clean. We got the fruit off the vine and into the winery before that terrible glass fire smoke hit us. I'm just so thankful. And we'll probably have about 125 cases of it this year. This particular one we're drinking right now is only 85 cases. But we plant in the Bordeaux tradition of meter by meter. And how many of you know how many inches are in a meter? 39. There's 3 inches longer than a yard.
Yeah.
So we plant the grapes meter by meter. And we have a 5-foot trellis, vertical shoot position. And we grow Cab, Malbec, and Petit Verdot all right here on the estate.
So if anyone's driven past Opus 1 on the highway, looks the same.
Yeah. And Lorena means the queen. She's my queen, and I named it after her.
Okay.
So here we are. This is our little jewel.
What's the next meal that you're going to serve this at? Not tonight, not counting tonight's lamb.
Gee, what's our next meal?
Probably, well, filet mignon would go wonderful.
No, but when? I don't have any. He doesn't really let me drink a lot of the inventory. So I have to really be careful.
Well, when you make 85 cases, you got to save it.
I know. It's hard, though. It's my favorite.
Now,
personally.
here's a question for you, because inquiring minds want to know, will you, you are, after 37 years, you are leaving the Hess Collection in a month or two.
I'm retiring at the end of this year. Yep.
Will you make more Calafia wines? You've kept it very, very small. It's been like a side hustle, like a passion project. Will you expand it?
Good question. Actually, I am. I am going to, because of my love and passion for Zinfandel and the California grape, and my love for Zap and all the Zin fans out there in the world, MaryLee and I are going to make a Zinfandel and add that to the portfolio. It will, it's in the wings.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away right now, but stay tuned. It will be released next spring. And if we get good customer support and feedback, I don't really want to enter the 3-tier distribution system too much, because I've been a part of that system for 37 years, and you live on airplanes and hotel rooms and the cars of distributors and calling, I can't go, and we can't travel much anymore. So I want to sell to people like I hope are all listening tonight. And I would like to add one other wine, which is really eclectic. I wish I could see all of you. I'd like to show of hands. How many of you have ever heard of Charbonneau? I mentioned it earlier, but it's truly an heirloom variety in California. It's shrinking. It's sadly going extinct. When I first started making Charbonneau, there was 65 acres.
For Hess. You've never.
Yeah,
made it
and
for
again,
Hess.
I made it for Hess in this heirloom and heritage varietal brand that I was in charge of called Artisan. That's where I met Sam in New York, working with Artisan.
So let me interject. Hit the chat, everybody. If you, yes or no, either way, have you had Charbonneau? It's a grape. It's a wine grape, and it's a wine. Have you had Charbonneau?
No.
I have a feeling it's going to be mostly. For me, I would say no. I've not had it. So that's going to be really interesting and eclectic. If it's anything like what you've done with Verdelho, it's going to be really cool.
It's going to be cool.
It'll be cool.
Esther Mobley in the San Francisco Chronicle, you guys, you want to learn a little about Charbonneau, you can go to Jancis Robinson's book, which you can buy on Amazon. I think it's about $90. It's called Grape Varieties.
Sure, there you go.
Oh, yeah, MaryLee's going to run over to our bookshelf here quickly and get it. Again, it's Jancis Robinson's an English writer, been on the scene for years, very highly respected lady. She wrote a field guide years and years ago on grape varieties, and now she's collaborated with 3 DNA labs in the world, one in Montpellier, one in Switzerland, and one at UC Davis. And she's made, you can't maybe see it.
Wine grapes.
Wine
Yeah,
grapes, but it comes in this hardcover, the slide. There's how thick it is. And there's 1,300 varieties in here. So you can kind of buy this. It'll never go out of date. You can give it to your kids and your grandkids because it's all based on DNA. It'll never change. And you can learn a lot about Charbonneau there.
It's a reference book, though.
Real quick, you can Google SF Gate, which is the portal for the San Francisco Chronicle, and then noodle around, get to the wine section. And the author of an article is Esther Mobley, Mobley. She's a great lady. She's the wine director there now. Our former wine director at the Chronicle actually went to New York, and he's working in the industry in New York now. I can't think of his name. Great guy too. Anyway, Esther wrote a two full page article in the Chronicle a couple of years ago, or not that long ago, 18 months, on Charbonneau.
John, is it John Bunn?
That doesn't sound.
You're close, Sam.
Well, it's David Breitstein. It's not me, but he suggested it might be John Bunn.
Oh no, wait.
That's close.
Yeah, we had dinner with him one night.
Anyway, Charbonneau actually started in France in the beginnings of the French Alps, and it gravitated to northern Italy, and the Italian immigrants took it to 2 places. Number 1, Northern California. Number 2, Argentina. And I'm kind of noted for my wine quizzes, and I always ask people, what name does Charbonneau have in Argentina? And I give them a hint by telling them that it is the number 2 premium varietal there,
Why don't you see if
behind Malbec. And I know we have somebody from Salta on the screen, and I'm sure that person could type in what it's known.
Tell him this is from.
And this is actually, this tapestry behind us is from the Calafia Valley in northern Argentina.
Where you made one.
All right,
But
well,
in case he doesn't type it in, I'll just tell you it's
he's not typed
Bonarda.
it in. So just tell us, what do the Argentinians call Charbonneau?
They call it Bonarda, Bonarda. And again,
Bonarda.
highly popular, finds its way in all kinds of blends. But then when it got here to Northern Cal, there he comes in. Somebody
That was me.
typed it in. Oh, that was you. Okay. Anyway, when it got here to Northern Cal, it was called Charbonneau. John Parducci embraced it big time. Beaulieu and Inglenook also embraced Charbonneau big time. And there was actually a group called the Charbonneau Society in the late 30s, early 40s, and all through the 50s. And they used to have these black tie dinners with stemware and logoed plates and stuff, touting the virtues of Charbonneau. Poor Charbonneau, though, is being taken out because of Cabernet Sauvignon is much more valuable.
Sure. I mean, it's not the brand that Cabernet Sauvignon is.
Oh, one last thing. Quiz question, but this is so great.
Go ahead.
That had two names in France, but one of them is called Corbeau du Noir, Corbeau, Corbeau du Noir.
Yeah.
So for 25 brownie points, all you French speakers out there, tell me what the word Corbeau means. I'll answer it for you because I can't see you.
Yeah, we don't know.
It means raven,
Ah,
black raven.
wow.
And,
So that,
and,
yeah.
And in, what's the hometown of Louis Pasteur up in the French Alps? In this town, Charbonneau reigns supreme, and they call it Corbeau du Noir, the black raven.
Yep.
And we don't know whether the wine is black, so we don't know whether they named it for the black wine or because the ravens showed up when the grapes were ripe.
Well, the birds
All
like
right.
the birds like grapes,
Bye-bye.
so could have been either. Well, listen,
Bye-bye.
Randle and MaryLee, thank you so much. This was
Thank you.
awesome. I'm going to show everybody just the information about your website and anybody who would like to get the wines. Take a look at the back of behind me here on the screen, calafiacellars.com, and use the promo code NYWE. Just add it to the notes section in additional notes when you are ordering. So thank you guys again. This was great and an education in
Come and visit us. We're here. When you come to Napa Valley, ring us up. We do private tastings in our garden.
Yes, and the answer to your question, there was a question. Steve said, "Is there a way to replay the stream?" Yes, absolutely. By the way, I want to thank the audience for not only being totally engaged and interactive with us, but I want to congratulate the audience because I'd say about half the people had Charbonneau, which is
Good.
You're
which is
kidding.
impressive, really impressive.
That is very impressive.
So
That is-
Finally.
I'll tell you what. If you know Charbonne, you come here. I'll scrounge one up and we'll taste it.
there you go. You heard it. Hold Randle to it. You heard it here. All right, guys. Well, listen, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for tuning
Thank
in. And
you.
thank you, Randle and MaryLee, for visiting with us. We will do this again soon.
Great. It was great fun. Thank you.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
My glass is empty.